This is an extremely disturbing case. So in August 2005, China Arnold of Ohio was having an argument over Paris's paternity with the dad. After they fought, she stuck her 28-day-old baby inside of this microwave for over 2 minutes, with it running. She ended up dying when her temperature reached 108. The next day, the parents took her to the hospital, and China tried to say that she was intoxicated, so she doesn't know how the child died. But that was bullshit. While she was in jail awaiting trial, she ended up having a romantic relationship with her cellmate, and she confessed to her how guilty she felt over the murder. So that lady ended up testifying against her, which caused China to get life in prison. It's honestly so messed up. China tried to get her other son to lie and say that the neighbor killed her baby, but that was proved to be BS, and now she'll rot in prison.
Be careful what you put in your body. In 2014, a couple returned to their home to find it trashed in baffling ways. There was lotion all over the door handles, all of their shoes had had their soles ripped off of them, and someone had dumped an entire can of paint all over the toilet. Despite the obvious break-in, the police come and can't find any evidence of theft, so they leave thinking the couple's not in danger anymore. That night, the couple hears scratching underneath their bed and what sounds like a crying animal. Not wanting to find out what it was, they leave and call the cops, who come right back and start investigating the house, and they make a startling discovery in their bedroom. Wedged underneath the couple's bed was this 90-pound tiny little woman carrying a huge butcher's knife and a hypodermic needle. As they're taking this crazy lady away in handcuffs, one of the officers comes over to the couple and is like, so she was high on meth, and for at least 2 hours, she had been burrowing a hole in the underside of your mattress with that knife to get to you.
Did you know that Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was based on a real killer? His name was Ed Gein, and he was nicknamed the Butcher of Plainfield. He lived alone in this super creepy farmhouse in Wisconsin. And what happened inside of this farmhouse will shock you. After his mother died, Ed went a little crazy. He started robbing graves and he murdered 2 local women. And he turned their bodies into art. He made chairs with human flesh, made skull bowls, and even created a skin suit out of human flesh. At night, on a full moon, Ed Gein would dance around in the moonlight in this full-body skin suit. And that's only the tip of the iceberg. This is one of the most disturbing true crime stories I've ever heard. If you want to hear the full story of Ed Gein, the Butcher of Plainfield, go listen to my podcast, Murder in America. It's the latest episode. The link is in my bio, and you can listen for free on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Trust me, this is my favorite true crime story, and you're going to love this podcast. It's really dark, and the link is in my bio. Go check it out.
Everyone beware, because this is a new kidnapping technique. Watch the video and I'll explain after. According to the men, there was a woman walking down the street, calmly just screaming. She was screaming and crying and asking for help, but was very calm. When the guys left, they saw her just get into a car and they drove off. The guys went inside because they knew it was a setup. If they went to go help that woman, the car would have been right there and would have gotten the guys. Or mugged them, I don't know. Please stay safe out there. This is so scary.
This is why I would never hire a stranger for a kid's birthday party. And if the photo's not bad enough, the mystery behind it is so much worse. And a reminder before I dive in that if you like all things spooky and true crime, check out my podcast. There's a link to it in my profile. So in the 1940s, the McLaren family in Houston, Texas was having a birthday party for their daughter, Rose. They hired a clown for the party, but an hour before the party started, they get a call from the company saying that the clown they hired was no longer available. They were going to send someone else in his place. And the parents are like, okay, fine, whatever. But then this man shows up to the party. And the kids are all terrified of him. No one really wants to take photos. The man stayed at the party for about 20 minutes and then just disappeared. But get this. After he left, the clown that they hired showed up to the party. And he apologized for being late. And the mother is like, what are you doing here? You canceled on us. And the clown's like, no, I didn't. And it was at that moment that one of the parents noticed that this little boy pictured here was missing. The little boy was never found, and the identity of this man remains a mystery even today.
Today we're going to talk about one of the hungriest and most disturbing people on Earth. His name was Terrari. He was a Frenchman born in 1772 in Lyon, France, and from a young age he had an insatiable appetite. His parents actually kicked him out as a teenager, which by this time he could eat an entire cow in just a few days. He ended up wandering the country of France as a performer, eating everything from rocks and cork to even live animals, his favorite of which were snakes. Once a war broke out, he was sent to serve in the French military, where rations were not enough to sustain him, and he quickly slipped into extreme exhaustion. It was here when he was sent to this hospital that things got extremely disturbing, as scientists and military doctors tried to figure out just how much and what he could eat. He ate everything people put in front of him, whether it was puppies or cats, even live birds, rats, fish, and eels. Doctors tried to feed him all sorts of strange things as a cure, like tobacco pills and vinegar, none of which worked. Terrari was even found trying to drink people's blood. However, the last straw was when truly disturbing things started occurring in the hospital. Staff found bodies in the morgue had been disturbed and were missing pieces, and after that, a young child actually disappeared, and Terrari was the only suspect. He was kicked out of the hospital at once, and the child was never found.
Have you heard about the supernatural phenomenon that sometimes happens to people in really bad car wrecks? Well, apparently multiple people who have been in horrible car accidents have reported seeing the same strange thing. It's called the third man syndrome, and it's when a supernatural presence offers comfort to a victim during a survival situation. I'm going to share one of the crazy stories with you now, but if you're interested in this, tonight's episode is going to be all of these stories. So a few years ago, a Reddit user was in a horrible car wreck. Like so bad they cut the car door off to get them out. They black out during the accident, but as they come to, they see a woman open their car door and get into the back seat. And the woman put her hand on the driver's shoulder and told him that it was going to be okay, and then she said that help was on the way. The user then blacked out again and came to with a fireman cutting off the door of the car. Afterwards, they're with it enough to talk to the police officers and the firemen on the scene, and they're telling them like, hey, there was this woman that got in the car with me, is she okay? And everyone is like, there was no one in the car with you. Apparently no cars passing by had even stopped for the accident because the fire department was so close, so it was super unlikely that anyone had gotten in the car with them. But this is not the only time that that's happened. Other people have reported a woman getting into the car with them after an accident. There's so many other supernatural stories just like this that I explore in the episode tonight, so make sure you're following along.
Here's a face that's been all over the news lately. Usually you'd see a photo like this with the title murder trial and assume that they're the victim. But not in this case. 32-year-old Lucy Letby has been charged with taking the lives of 7 babies and attempting to take 10 more. She was working as a neonatal nurse at the Countess of Chester Hospital from June 2015 to June 2016. And this was the time span in which these infants passed away. She was finally removed from the neonatal unit after a senior doctor realised that she was the only common denominator for all of these children. Lucy Letby has pleaded not guilty on all accounts. So her defence team have said that it's just a coincidence that she was present at the passing of every child. They've also said that the passings were natural and not caused by any human interference. The prosecution, however, have presented evidence stating that the victims' lives were deliberately taken, mainly by injecting air into their circulation. Police also supposedly recovered some major evidence from her home after her arrest in 2018. The evidence was a handwritten note, with one section of it reading the following: "I unalived them on purpose because I'm not good enough to care for them." Well, I guess, take from that what you will.
10-year-old serial killer. Viewer discretion is advised. This is Mary Bell, and she could easily be one of the most sadistic murderers in history, even though she was only 10 years old. Mary allegedly grew up being abused, and her mother would even sell her to other men at the age of 5. All of this abuse fueled this anger inside of her, and she had to find some sort of way to release it. On May 11th, 1968, Mary Bell was playing with a little 3-year-old toddler, and he mysteriously fell off of an air raid shelter. This was the start of her violent outrage. Just 2 weeks later, on March 25th, the boy Martin Brown's body was found dead inside of an abandoned building. It was later discovered that Mary lured this little boy into this abandoned building and strangled him with her bare hands. 2 years later, Mary then strangled a 3-year-old boy and carved the letter M into his stomach with a razor blade. And then she used scissors to cut and mutilate the body. Mary eventually confessed to this by writing notes because she was bragging about it, and the police arrested her. Here's the crazy thing: she was arrested and released just a couple years later later, and today she could possibly still be alive. One of the terms for her confession was that after she was released, her name would be changed and everything. The latest information we have of her is pretty much she had a daughter when she got released, and nobody knows where she's at now. So what do you think? Do you think she should be forgiven because she was a child, or do you think that fire is still inside of her waiting to strike again? Let me know in the comments down below, and make sure to like and follow for more videos.
This is one of the most horrific things I've ever heard of happening to a person. So senseless, so meaningless. This is Randy Cook, and he's an Uber Eats delivery driver. He's a delivery driver in Florida. Sadly, he was. This one hits so close to home for me because I deliver DoorDash and have for the last year, and I'm going to tell you what I'm about to say is literally my worst fear. So, he was on his last delivery of the night. It was 7 p.m. when he texted his wife that he was going to hit this one last delivery and then come home. Sadly, he didn't come home. At 7:48, his wife texted him and there was no response. So she contacted the authorities. After 48 hours of him not returning home, the sheriffs got involved. They contacted Uber Eats and found out his location and the last address that he was at. So they went over there and knocked on the door. They didn't see anything suspicious, so they left. The thing is, this last delivery was less than a mile from his own house. The neighbor's video surveillance captured Randy on the delivery walking up the driveway, and then the surveillance camera just cuts off. But then something horrible happens. The next day's surveillance camera shows somebody walking out with several trash bags. Deputies checked those trash bags, and they had human remains inside. His wife, Kathy, had told authorities that she knew something horrible had happened to her husband. Something horrible definitely happened. His dismembered body was found in those trash cans, inside of the trash bags. Why? Why take someone's life so senselessly? They're delivering food to your house to make money for their family. Like, what is wrong with this world? And why are there so many sick people in it? Comment. Let me know what you think. This is horrible. And honestly, I don't even want to deliver for DoorDash anymore. And yes, our GPS shows our location, but that's not going to stop you from being put in trash bags. I personally think these apps need to do better.
I have burned millions of dollars to warm my daughter when she was cold. I am Pablo Escobar, born on December 1st, 1949 in Colombia into a poor family. I began my criminal career by stealing cars and selling smuggled cigarettes. In 1975, after failing university, I ventured into the lucrative drug trade. I was first arrested in 1976. I attempted to bribe the judges to avoid jail unsuccessfully. Consequently, I orchestrated the assassination of the two officers who arrested me. In the 80s, I founded the Medellin cartel in Colombia, dominating the global drug trade. I became one of the richest men in the world. My life of crime was marked by significant milestones. In 1982, I was elected as a deputy to the House of Representatives due to my popularity among the poor, whom I supported with my social works. However, my election was invalidated due to illegal campaign financing. My influence and methods subsequently terrorized the country. Plata o plomo, silver or lead, you were either corrupted or killed. In 1985, while the Supreme Court was considering possible extradition, I collaborated with a left-wing guerrilla group, M19. I paid them to storm the Palace of Justice in Bogota in order to destroy incriminating documents. This attack resulted in the death of half of the Supreme Court judges. In January 1991, I surrendered to Colombian authorities after negotiating a deal that allowed me to stay in a luxurious prison that I had built myself. I continued to run my empire from there. In July 1992, I escaped from the prison upon learning that the government intended to transfer me to a more secure facility. I then became the most wanted man in the country. In December 1993, I was located by the police through a phone call I made to my wife and son. I was gunned down on the roof of a house in Medellin during a shootout with law enforcement. I am proud to have been the king of the most powerful criminal organization in the world, and to have amassed a fortune estimated at $30 billion.
I am the most wanted person in the world since the plane I was flying that day mysteriously disappeared. It was a sunny and bright day as the plane rose at the airport. I was very excited because we were going to fly to a distant place called Beijing in China. We were all smiling and ready to take off. The plane soared into the sky like a giant bird. The stewardess gave us treats and made us feel comfortable in our seats. But suddenly, the plane started to shake a lot. I got really scared, and so did all the other passengers. Things started to fall and the ceiling lights flickered. I heard a loud noise and the oxygen masks fell in front of us. We all put on the masks and fastened our seatbelts. I was a little scared, but the stewardess reassured us and told us everything would be okay. The plane continued to shake and it seemed like we were flying towards an unknown place. I looked out the window and saw the sky turning dark. I didn't know where we were going or what was happening. The adults were worried and wondered what had happened. Some said maybe there was a problem with the plane, others said strange things like we were in another world. But we couldn't communicate with anyone outside. We couldn't call Mom and Dad to tell them we were okay. We were all trapped in a mysterious place, and that scared me a little. Many hours passed and the plane kept flying aimlessly. I was confused and sad. I wanted to go home and hug Mom and Dad, but I couldn't do that. All the passengers were worried and some were crying silently. Time passed and no one knew what had happened to the plane. It became a big mystery story that everyone around the world was trying to solve. Every day people talked about Flight MH370 and what had happened to it. As a child, I didn't understand everything that was going on, but I knew it was something very sad. I hope that one day they find the plane and discover what happened. But in the meantime, I will always remember that mysterious flight and the stories they told about it.
Shocking case of the Philpotts. On the 11th of May 2012, 6 children were in bed asleep when a huge fire broke out of their home. As smoke roared through the building, Mairead Philpott, the children's mother, called the emergency services. Their dad, Mick Philpott, was reportedly making heroic attempts to try and save them. However, 5 children unfortunately died in the fire and the eldest actually passed away in hospital later on. At first, this appeared to be a tragic accident, but the truth was soon revealed. The fire had been started intentionally with petrol underneath the letterbox. When word got out about who the children's father was, many people were already familiar with him. Mick Philpott was notorious for being outspoken and provocative and had appeared on The Jeremy Kyle Show. He claimed to have had 2 wives and seemed to be really proud of this. He also had a horrible history of abusive behaviour towards women. He had been convicted for attacking 2 women with a knife and headbutting a female colleague. A press conference was held about the tragedy that had unfolded. Reporters really expected at this point for the Philpotts to come out and appeal to anyone who had any information about the fire. What the Philpotts actually did was just kind of came out and started thanking people. They didn't ask for any help with any information about the case at all. The only thing Mick asked for is to be left alone. If this genuinely had nothing to do with the parents, you would think that they would come out and be desperate for more information. Neighbours from across the road actually went to the police and told them that they had seen Mick during the fire. He was outside pretending to cough, not actually going in trying to help rescue his children. Police were now suspicious enough to try and set a trap for the Philpotts. They kept them in a hotel room and actually bugged the room. The recording reveals Mick quizzing his wife about how convincing she'd been in her police interview. Locals had also spotted the couple in a pub doing karaoke, dancing and drinking shots. Incredibly strange behaviour for two people who just lost their children. It also came out that Mick was reportedly flirting with nurses at the hospital where his son was on a life support machine. The true story of what actually happened was all about Mick Philpott getting revenge on his ex. In early 2012, one of his wives had left him. She walked out with 5 of their children and Mick just could not take this rejection. He wanted to do something to get her back and wanted custody of his 5 children with her. He set the fire up to frame the ex to make it look like she'd done it. He wanted to be the heroic dad to save all his children and for his ex to go to prison for it. Mick got life in prison for this. Mariad got 17 years and is now released.